Today we have some guests in the house. First, we have an associate professor in the Department of Politics, Lagos State University, Professor Sylvester Odion. It's a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you.
We also have a renowned poet who's also the chairman of the National Union of Teachers, as well as an executive member of the Democratic Socialist Movement, Mr Daggar Tola, otherwise known as Daggar T.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon all.
Good afternoon. It's nice having you people, folks on our set. When Zimbabwe's military detained President Robert Mugabe on Tuesday night, it seemed the stage is set for the ouster of Africa's oldest serving leader and heads of state. If I may ask you, maybe I'll start with you, Professor Sylvester. Has the sun set for Mugabe?
Well, I think without equivocation, Mugabe is in his twilight. Even if the political odds were not against him, the biological factors are against him. And so that is a real point that one has to make. But in the context of the unfolding events in Zimbabwe, and I think that his time is up. There's no doubt about that. His time is up. Beyond the ideology and the dynamics of politics itself, looking at public opinion, public opinion does not favor his continuous stay in power. That's the point to make.
Yeah, Daggar T, let's look at the way this has come to play. Military intervention in terms of governance in Africa has been an anathema. The military said it is not considered a coup, but one begins to think otherwise based on the manner in which this intervention has come. What's your reaction to that?
Well, let me say there's a sense in which the military is it's very correct. It's not a coup, because practically nothing has changed. Mugabe is in power. There's not going to be any policy shift or change. The action is an attempt to bridge an attempted succession that a majority, quote and unquote, to use their own language of the criminals around Mugabe, are not necessarily supportive of. I spoke with somebody from Zimbabwe yesterday, trying to find out what was the event, and to quote her directly, said it's an infighting within the ZANU PF, and that practically nothing has changed. But there's a sense in which there is a lot of excitement in a lot of people. But the truth is that all of the pictures that have come through, people are not necessarily excited on the streets of Zimbabwe, because fundamentally nothing is going to change. This is an attempt to ensure that what the current arrangement remains. So even though Mugabe biologically can no longer continue, fundamentally nothing will change in favor of the mass of the ordinary people of the people of Zimbabwe.
Prof, do you agree with that? The way the intervention has come?
I think his analysis is to some extent, correct. We in West Africa, are familiar with coup d'etat. You have the palace type when it happens within, a supposedly close-knit junta, in power. What has happened in Zimbabwe is essentially one of the factors in terms of the succession politics in Zimbabwe, which is the military. The military is not just any other military, as you have in Nigeria, a colonial army. But here's a liberation army, with an ideological base, whether it is largely eroded or whether there's nothing left in that ideology, but that is the type of army that you have. And much earlier, when Mugabe took over the leadership from Nabanigi Sito, after the Chamboa declaration in 1977, the military or the combatants then of the Zala combatants
and the Zapu,
and not even Zapu now. Where Zapu was another part of the liberation group that was also there, led by Joshua Nkomo and the rest of them. They were subordinated to the political leadership. The last attempt to water that down when the young Marxist Leninist cadre within the liberation movement sought, to override the political leadership. They were purged. And since then, a firm civil-military relation that ensures that the military is subordinate to civil authority was established even before independence. And that is what you see playing out. In the succession crisis, there were many factors. The diaspora factor is there. The Mugabe's wife, the Grace factor is there. The opposition factor is there. Then you also talk about the entrenched institutions of the state, like the Electoral Commission, and all of that. They are part of it. But of course, anybody who understands the logic of power will tell you that the military is the material force of the state. Now, that military, though Mugabe himself is part and parcel of that, structure, is distancing itself from, the attempt by Mugabe to stall another succession arrangement. We would have probably seen Emerson Mnangagwa emerging
as the next leader.
As he said, the military in Zimbabwe is hell-bent on ensuring the continuity of ZANU-PF hegemony in Zimbabwean politics. And Chiwenga has said it in the past that the Zimbabwean military will not support any candidate without liberation credential to succeed in power in Zimbabwe. And so, when they say it is not a coup, it's actually an internal crisis. The way it is resolved will show whether it's a coup or not. But you can call it an insurrection within the ruling party. To the extent that they are still deferring to the commander-in-chief, you cannot really say in plain terms the way we will qualify coup d'etat in West Africa that is still a coup. Because as at yesterday or so, Mugabe is saying that he will step down. And given the general crisis in the continent, wherever you have a constitutional order, it is better, in order to avoid serious conflict, to use that as the first line of defense. Follow what the Constitution says.
Now, for 37 years, Daggar T, Mugabe has ruled Zimbabwe from independence to the verge of the economic collapse. And in all these periods, he has outwitted his opponents via intimidation, electoral manipulation, and purges of his own party. Do you see him surviving this?
Well, I don't think we should be saying the issue is Mugabe, because like he has pointed out, biologically, ultimately, it's going to be out of all of this process. The issue at all times in 1980, 37 years period, remains the mass of the people in Zimbabwe. And that point must be made quite clear, that they are themselves their own messiahs. No categories of individuals, no matter how ideologically grounded. I'm happy he used the word eroded. Whatever ideas they want to ban in the name of the people. And which is why the challenge ultimately is to pose this challenge to mass of the people who are presently at home watching the development of events. That what is at stake is not who will succeed Mugabe, whether Grace or the old guards who want one of their men to continue and keep all of the arrangement in process. But ultimately, the question of the economy of Zimbabwe, the question of the lives and fortunes of the mass of the working people, and that ultimately they must decisively begin to organize themselves to intervene in all of this process. Because the military, whatever I want to refer to that as intervene, has not intervened bearing in mind the interests of the mass of the ordinary people on the streets. It has intervened to keep its own interests safe, and that interest is clearly well protected within the framework of ensuring that the hood guards around Mugabe, continue to be those who dictate the pace of what of the Zimbabwean economy. And which is why our own appeal will be to the mass of the people in Zimbabwe that this offers another golden opportunity, because the military must not be allowed to decide the ultimate fate of 13 million Africans or 13 million Zimbabweans as to what will happen in the coming period in relation to how to move events forwards in Zimbabwe.
Great. Based on these last comments by Daggar T, Prof, what do you make of the reactions of Zimbabweans as these events unfold? There seems to be business as usual. Everybody seems to be going on. I mean, one would have expected jubilations on the streets because there's been mixed reactions. Many Zimbabweans want Mugabe to go. What do you make of their reactions to this?
Well, I think that the assumption that many Zimbabweans want Mugabe to go is wrong. It is wrong. You must understand this very well. Mugabe, when my colleague was talking about aspect of the Zimbabwean politics, he talked about the urban middle class, where somebody like Morgan Tsvangirai draws much of his support. But the peasants in the rural areas, Mugabe has that base as his base. And so that is why, despite what you say in terms of the freeness and fairness of the electoral process, he has always managed to win. So you must understand that. And again, from my own interrogation, an interview that I conducted with some of their scholars a few months back, they believe that the ZANU political machine is intact and that nobody can change it unless it is changed by actors or reformers within the ZANU PF, themselves, that can alter the political equation. So it would appear to me from the disinterestedness in terms of coming out openly like we do here to jubilate and welcome the new messiahs, that they are aware, very much aware that nothing has changed in terms of the political equation.
Exactly.
All right. Daggar T, let's look at the reactions of the international body. For example, the AU had come out to say that they will not support. In fact, they made the statement that the body will never accept the military coup d'etat in Zimbabwe. In fact, we demand respect for the Constitution and a return to the Constitution order. This was the AU leader. What's your view on the reaction?
Let me say that at the end of the day, it amounts to practically nothing if those on the ground actually want to go that particular direction. Don't forget, we are talking about Southern Africa, where the major power remains in South Africa. And already the defense minister has been sent to meet with Mugabe. And from the kind of relationship you have between Zuma and Mugabe, you can be sure nothing from that kind of kite will fly. But ultimately, when we use the word international community, these are not people with different interests. They have their particular interests, and they will defend that particular interest. And the interest from the point of view of the AU, I must say, is not to encourage, a repeat of this same phenomenon, because you have nearly in all of the states in the African continent where they are dissatisfied regimes, and not being seen opposing a military takeover in one place will be an attempt to encourage some other military guns in other parts of the continent to take similar type of actions. We have not been oblivious of the dances the chief of army here, Buratai, has been performing in various parts of the countries. Whether I want to accept it or not, these are pre-warning signs and signals of possibility that the military could effect an action in this part of the continent if events begin to degenerate. So a successful military coup in a place like Zimbabwe, and which is why Mugabe and co, Zuma and co are in negotiation with the military to present it appropriately that this is not a military coup, because they are scared of how that can become a signal or an example in other African countries. But the point must be made, that it is the mass of the people themselves that must, rise, anchored with their own independent program of transforming society, and launch themselves within the framework of a political party, and subject the military, as part and parcel of that program. In Nigeria, we had a successful, quote and unquote, massive movement in the June 12th movement, where the military was on the streets. But unfortunately, we didn't have the necessary leadership that would have been able to pilot the military and all of that sections of the military that were supporting this mass movement on the street, and unite, workers in uniform as well as workers, on the streets, to create a united army, to bid for political power. But the military, as represented in the top brass, in the bureaucracy, have a particular interest. They've defended Mugabe all of this period. So they are not out against Mugabe. They are not out against the programs of Mugabe. In fact, they have been a machinery in the hands of Mugabe in cutting down all of the democratic institutions and ensuring that the Mugabe line of succession continues up to date. But they are at a state where they feel embarrassed that one person, quote and unquote, the grace factor from nowhere, now wants to become Lord Mayor over all of them. And the import of that will be that if Grace succeeds in coming to power fully, Grace will go all out against them. So this is a battle for their own survival. Mugabe is good and is by and large out of the picture. These people, because the way the vice president was dealt with and just thrown away, if Grace fully has full powers, they know they are the first set of people Grace will go for. So this is a struggle for their own survival and continued relevance within the bureaucracy, the Mugabe bureaucracy that has been created. The military is demonstrating that they wouldn't mind any other person to take over power among them, not necessarily them. They will continue to remain in the background. From the actions the past 3-4 days, they have demonstrated that willingness to say that we are not interested. The worst that might possibly happen will be to say that we'll continue with the process for elections to be held come 2018, and that the world should not disturb us. But for us, significantly, is that if allowed to continue in that process, if we go to a process where elections will take place, we will be calling for the mass of the people, for the need for a working class political organization, distinct and different from the MDC, which even though started as a political party within the trade unions, canvassing the interests of workers, adopted neoliberal policies, deviated from it, which explains why the mass of the working class themselves are not in support of the NDC like they were in 2000. Massive support of all workers, for the MDC and for Morgan. But Morgan and co have demonstrated that they are not any different. The military currently have also made it quite clear that they are looking for a broad coalition. Morgan is back into South Africa and all of this, and so they don't want the boat to be rocked. And all of this arrangement ultimately is keeping the mass of the people as spectators. And the mass need to rise from their slumber to intervene directly with their own program for change, for transforming the economy and ensuring that their basic needs and necessities are provided for.
Prof, what does this event unfolding in Zimbabwe, what does it portend for the region, for the country, and for Africa as a continent?
Well, let me go back to the first question you asked, which my colleague responded to, the international community. International community, one, maybe we classify it into two, should be classified into two. African response. then the larger international community. We're talking about the
Western
world.
imperialist response.
Mugabe has not been a friend
To
of
the
the
West.
Western world because of his anti-imperialist, posture. He has not. He's very firm about that the sovereignty of Zimbabwe, must be respected. Then beyond that, the continent has a policy within the context of what we call the third wave of democratization. After a series of military coup, the democratization that you see now in every part of Africa, they are interested in keeping that order because that order is better than series of civil wars, conflicts that we have had in the continent, by which by no means are we free from those conflicts. They are still there. And so, when there are crises, where you have a constitution, the ground norm, it is the right thing to do is to insist that the actors respect that ground norm, which is basically what they have done. And even in my analysis, which I did shortly before the coup, which the Sahara reporter published almost immediately after the event, I had also advised that the first line of action will be to respect the Constitution. I'm not quite sure now. The Constitution also even talked about if the president is replaced or is removed, they use that word, it should be succeeded by the vice president, among other factors. So, but what to respond to the other question, I did a major response when the Islamic Brotherhood came to Nigeria, and I delivered a keynote note on, the violation of rights in Egypt. And it was titled Threats to Democracy in Africa. One of the most widely read paper on academia.edu to date. Downloaded every day. I argue that the objective conditions in Africa would determine whether military will enter into politics or will be out of politics. So once you have conflict situation, once you have instability, those who are trained to manage violence is the military. And the military will always intervene, using the national security doctrine principle to restore law and order. And so that is why African countries, by virtue of the objective conditions, we are not out of the coup cycle. Coup will always happen when the conditions are ripe for a coup d'etat. If you have breakdown of law and order, if you have severe economic crisis, which the civil authority cannot manage, the military will always intervene. So the lesson is that the current quasi-democratic, institutions in Africa should sit up, and deepen the democratic process to avert this kind of intervention. Military will always intervene when the objective conditions are ripe for intervention.
Daggar T, while Zimbabweans, debate their country's future, what are your predictions? How does the country get its foot back from being derailing the democratic process?
Now, let me say that the events he has just made reference to in Egypt is not necessarily any different from what is happening currently. When the movement against Mubarak, started, it was the success of this movement will mean that the entirety of all of the criminals around Mubarak will be endangered, and ultimately the military had to intervene. Even when elections were conducted, and Morsi and Co came into power, the military didn't extremely feel very comfortable. It saw that this organization did not have all of the strength, to put the growing urge for more reforms, to advance the movement on the street further against the entirety of the elites in Egypt. So it came in. in this same situation, even though it has not been propelled by a mass movement on the street, the quest for succession has propelled the signal danger, for the military to intervene directly. And I want to say that there can be no better future for the mass of the people if we don't return, to the building of a massive social movement. And the military, as presently constituted in Zimbabwe, is not part of that movement. It does not have an agenda that can claim to be the agenda of the mass of the working people, of Zimbabwe. It has a particular interest to protect. Of course, that interest in the past is aligned with the entirety of the programs of what Mugabe stands for. But how do we judge of what that program has offered the past 37 years to the mass of working people? And which is why there is no good future out there for people of Zimbabwe if in their millions they are not intervening in these developing events. It is only in intervening in their millions with a program, with an independent program that opposes the military intervention, that also demands for an end of the regime of Mugabe, and puts forth a program for a government that will defend its interests, that will carry out a program of reviewing the wages, that will carry out the program of cancelling the existing debt. The current foreign debt of Zimbabwe is as huge as 11.6 billion. For a country of 13 million, it's an huge debt burden that forces the country. The Zimbabwe, just some 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, had to cough out about $125 million to the IMF as part of its Paris payback debt arrangement for the debt to be pushed forward. And this is a Zimbabwe economy that is crying for huge fund. You cough out 425 million. So Zimbabwe can only go forward within the framework of a government that is ready to say no to all of this huge debt, that is ready to commit the tiny resources of Zimbabwe to develop Zimbabwe. But this kind of a government must prepare itself for massive oppositions from the West, from massive oppositions even from regimes in South Africa, because this will be sending a new radical alternative, not just in South Africa, not just in the whole of Africa, but in the whole of the globe. And what this will mean is that the international community will come all out against this kind of regime. But ultimately, without this kind of approach, Zimbabwe should be ready for more harder times in the coming period.
Prof, what's your prediction? What's next for this country? A country that was once known to be the food basket of Southern Africa. Now, there's been so much mismanagement of the economy. What's next for it?
I think that the economic crisis was partly contrived and also partly a consequence
of a stand.
A consequence of climate. The region suffered drought, that was there, and the land reform program, which meant that land has to be redistributed among the Zimbabwean people, was also sabotaged. There were reports of white farmers setting ablaze their farms on fire to create, hunger in order to frustrate that land distribution process. So for any agenda for change in Zimbabwe, the land question must be in the forefront. It must be done in ways that are democratic.
Exactly.
Not through cronyism, as he has been accused of. That is one thing that you can't run
away from.
I also don't think that you can solve the Zimbabwe economic problem through neoliberal policies. I delivered a lecture yesterday on Baba Majola's lecture, anniversary lecture, and it was on political economy and the burgeoning cycle of debt. Nigeria is already bound on the third
57
road to slavery, third slavery, rather. The overall, so external, component of it is about $15.2 billion. That is a lot. And when they do the analysis, they tell you that as a ratio of GDP, it's actually wrong to use that as a basis for measuring, whether you are under borrowed or you can borrow more. They should rather use the net present value of export earnings, which they are not using.
Because the net is the basis from which you can make payments subsequently.
So they are not doing that. So I think that neoliberal policy can save, Zimbabwe. But Zimbabwe must leverage on the international relationship that it has, particularly with China and with its bigger neighbor, South Africa.
Prof, we appreciate your coming around. Daggar T, thank you very much for appearing on our program.
Thanks so much for having us.